Hello all, today we're going to look at Sexual Need Fulfillment and Satisfaction in Consensually Non-Monogamous Relationships by Muise, Lawton, Moores, and Impet. It was published in the July of 2019 issue of the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships. As a general rule these days, at least in North America, people seek emotional and sexual support from one partner. That is, they are romantically monogamous. However, not everyone chooses to be monogamous. Some people are in consensually non-monogamous relationships in which both partners consent to seeing other people. That non-monogamy can come in a few forms. First, there are open relationships. In an open relationship, both partners can seek out other individuals to have sex with, as long as they communicate with their partner what they're doing. The second kind is swinging, which involves swapping partners, or swinging between partners. These arrangements can occur within the context of specific swinging events such as dedicated parties or meetups. Coupled participants may add a third person for a threesome, or two couples may swap partners for the night. The third type of non-monogamy is polyamory, in which partners agree to potentially engage in multiple romantic relationships at the same time. Despite the growing interest among the general public in consensual non-monogamy, little scholarship has actually explored how these relationships work. To that end, three possible explanations have been posited as to how sexual need fulfillment functions in these consensually non-monogamous relationships. One possibility is that the extra partners contrast with the primary partner, and thus sexual satisfaction with the primary partner is lower. Contrary to the contrast model, the additive model suggests that greater need fulfillment in one relationship might spill over to the others in which the individual is involved. And finally, the compensation model suggests that need fulfillment in one relationship is associated with greater need fulfillment in another relationship, particularly when need fulfillment in the other relationship starts out low. Put simply, because the individual can offload some of their sexual needs to another person, they need less from one partner and thus can focus on the needs that this partner is fulfilling. For Study 1, participants were recruited from websites, Facebook groups, and subreddits for people in consensually non-monogamous relationships. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective in life, 89% of their sample consisted of individuals in polyamorous relationships, so the authors excluded the other 11% to reach a final N of 405. They then conducted a post-hoc power analysis and found they had an 88% chance of detecting a small effect. Statistical power is your ability to detect an effect assuming one exists. In a post-hoc power analysis, you calculate your likelihood of detecting a predicted effect based on the sample size you were able to collect. As a general rule, we like to have at least an 80% chance of detecting our predicted effect. On to measures. Participants completed all measures of interest for each of the partners with whom they had relationships. For simplicity, the authors just analyzed data for what they deem the participants as primary and secondary relationships. It's important to note that among non-monogamous individuals, the terms primary and secondary may carry with them hierarchical connotations that may not be accepted by the individuals. In order to avoid imposing a judgment of greater significance of one partner over another on the participants, the survey asked about the amount of time spent with each partner in order to determine primary versus secondary status. As such, both I and the authors used the terms primary and secondary merely as a shorthand for how much time the participants spent with those partners. For relationship satisfaction, the authors used the 16-item version of the Couples Satisfaction Index. 10 items were rated on a 7-point scale from not at all true to completely true, and 6 items were rated on 7-point semantic differential scales from, for example, boring to interesting. Sexual need fulfillment was measured using the partner-focused subscale of the new scale of sexual satisfaction. This is actually my current favorite measure of sexual satisfaction since it includes both an individual-focused subscale and a partner-focused subscale, in addition to having good psychometrics. Participants responded to the 8 items on a 5-point scale from not at all satisfied to extremely satisfied. And, since attachment anxiety and avoidance may be important predictors in the types of people who might engage in consensual non-monogamy, the authors measured those factors for each relationship using the short version of the Experiences and Close Relationships Inventory. This measure is 16 items rated on a 7-point Likert scale. The authors analyzed their data using multilevel modeling, which allowed them to not only control for a number of factors, but also account for the fact that a participant's own scores for one relationship are probably related to their scores for other relationships. And now results. Consistent with prior work on monogamous relationships, they found that within each individual relationship, sexual need fulfillment was positively associated with sexual satisfaction, though interestingly, this was more the case for the secondary relationship than the primary. More interestingly, sexual need fulfillment in the primary relationship did spill over into the second, but not the other way around. This seems to support the additive model rather than the contrast model. They then tested to see if sexual need fulfillment changed any of these associations, and it did not, so no points for the compensation model. These findings could not be explained by differences in attachment anxiety and avoidance. Gender did not moderate any of the key findings. Since Study 1 was such a success, the authors decided to try and replicate their findings with a more diverse sample, hopefully trying to get more swingers and people in open relationships. Participant recruiting was the same as before, but this time they also recruited participants from Amazon's Mechanical Turk. MTurk is a platform on which researchers can recruit participants for their studies. The participants then are paid through the platform at an average rate of 10 cents per minute. Sexual need fulfillment was assessed using a measure adapted from another measure that was itself adapted from a measure on general communal strength of the relationship. Now, while it's certainly understandable to modify existing measures to fit the needs of your study, especially when there are no existing measures for what you're interested in, doing so carries concern for measure validity. We generally have quite high standards for the measures we use, and one-offs don't have the benefit of going through the vetting process to ascertain whether they meet those standards or not. For sexual satisfaction, they use the global measure of sexual satisfaction, which is becoming the gold standard of sexual satisfaction measures due to its excellent psychometrics and short length. Relationship satisfaction was measured using the 3-item satisfaction subscale of the Perceived Relationship Quality Components Inventory. The PRQC is a pretty standard measure, but I am curious as to why they didn't use the global measure of relationship satisfaction since they used the GM-sex. The authors also included a 1-item measure of how explicit their relationships rules were. And now results. Once again, the authors found that within each relationship, sexual need fulfillment was associated with relationship satisfaction. They also found that sexual need fulfillment from the primary relationship did spill over into relationship satisfaction in the secondary relationship, but not the other way around. Points for the additive model. But when we just look at men, sexual need fulfillment in the secondary relationship was associated with relationship satisfaction in the primary relationship. And looking at sexual satisfaction within each relationship, sexual need fulfillment was associated with sexual satisfaction. Primary partner sexual need fulfillment did spill over into secondary partner sexual satisfaction. However, increased secondary partner sexual need fulfillment was associated with decreased sexual satisfaction in the primary relationship, so I guess points for both the additive and the contrast models. However, the negative association was only the case for women. In testing the compensation model, Muise et al. Found that primary relationship sexual need fulfillment did not moderate the association between secondary relationship sexual need fulfillment and relationship or sexual satisfaction. However, secondary relationship sexual need fulfillment did marginally moderate the association between primary partner need fulfillment and secondary relationship satisfaction. Primary partner need fulfillment was associated with greater secondary relationship and sexual satisfaction, when need fulfillment was low, but not high. These results held when controlling for participants' own sexual communal motivation and rule explicitness. So in sum, the additive model seems to have the most support. In other words, sexual need fulfillment in people's primary relationship spills over into the second relationship. The authors discuss some other implications from some of their specific findings, but since many of those findings were not found in both studies, I'm hesitant to wholly endorse them without some more evidence. There is one more thing that I would like to touch on because it might be an explanation for the additive model. It could be that this spillover happens because people in consensually non-monogamous relationships are offloading some of their sexual needs to different partners. For example, if one partner isn't scratching a certain itch, then there might be another who does. And since these individuals can offload certain sexual needs, they can then focus on the needs that each partner does satisfy, thus rising tides lift all ships. But all of these findings are merely correlational. We don't have directionality, not to mention causation. It could simply be that people who are good at getting their sexual needs met from one partner are also good at getting it from another. Also, the authors note that sexual need fulfillment in a monogamous relationship might be qualitatively different from sexual need fulfillment in a consensually non-monogamous relationship, since people in those relationships also have to be comfortable with their partner being with other people. In the future, I really want to see some longitudinal work to at the very least tease out directionality here. It could be that once we see how these dynamics play out over time, the compensation and contrast models might find new support. We could also see if newness of relationship is an important factor in these associations. Maybe it could be that hopping between romantic or sexual partners keeps things new and shiny, leading to greater satisfaction. The authors also listed interest in examining compersion, that is, happiness due to others' happiness, as a possible future direction, and I couldn't agree more. The cuckold community would be a great place to look for findings in that vein. I just want to share one final statement from the authors that I particularly liked. The belief that monogamy is superior is an implicit assumption underlying contemporary theories of development and intimacy, and the current findings suggest that it is valuable to consider how C&M relationships can inform existing perspectives of relationship quality. Applying some of the tenets of C&M relationships, i.e. that some needs can be outsourced to other relationships, can help oxygenate or increase happiness in monogamous relationships. For instance, open communication and managing jealousy and attraction are insights that C&M relationships could afford monogamous relationships. Future research could extend the current findings to monogamous relationships and investigate whether outsourcing needs to others can improve one's romantic relationship and vice versa. That's all for now. Please like, share, and subscribe. And if you've got a paper you'd like me to dissect, or more thoughts on this one, let me know in the comments.